My name is Darek Morris. I'm the community group coordinator at Plymouth Community Church, and we wanted to take some time to carve out why we do community groups and what they actually look like and how this plays out in our context and our particular time and space. And so community groups are where the people of God founded on Jesus live out the life that He meant for them to live. So it's where we authenticate the message that we preach on a Sunday morning, because the church is not just a Sunday event. The church is meant to be the body of believers living out life in community Monday through Sunday. So because God existed fully in Jesus, in the body of Jesus, He intends to do the same thing in the body of the church, because the church is to be centered and founded on Jesus, His gospel, His good news that He brings to lost sinners, the hope that He brings. And so because of that, we want the church to operate in the world, in the community, as the body of Jesus, pointing people to the hope, to the forgiveness, to the salvation that's found in Him and Him alone. And so when the world looks to the church, when the world looks to the community of believers operating in the world as the body of Jesus, they get to see the one thing that we have to offer, and that's the good news. That's the good news and the hope that we have in Jesus, the restorer, the redeemer, the one who makes beauty out of ashes. That's what we get to do in the world. So how this plays out in our community groups is intentionality. And we want to be intentional in 4 different rhythms, 4 different things that we do in our community groups, in the local community as well. And so the first one that we're going to do and we're going to be very intentional with is participation. We want to make sure that we're participating in the different events in the life of the community outside of the life of the church. And because the only way for the lost world to see Jesus is by the body of believers who believe in and live out the message that is heard through Jesus. And so we want to participate in the fun things. So whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's good food, whether it's good drink, whether it's good fellowship together in the community with people who don't believe in the same things that we do, who don't look like we do, who don't talk like we do, the only way for them to see what we believe actually does change you is living life with them. So the next thing that we're going to do, and we're going to make sure that we're very intentional with, is hospitality. We want to make sure that we're inviting people in to the life that we are doing together. And it's no structure to it, it's just relaxed, good fun. So whether it looks like barbecues, whether it looks like going to games, whether it looks like going to your children's games, doing life that you're already doing, just with an intentionality behind it. Because what we want is to go to people, but then to also invite them into our lives as well, on our terms, on our space. And so hospitality allows us to do that. And that could look as simple as going out to eat with friends and inviting a friend who you know doesn't know Jesus into that event as well. The third thing we're going to do, and we're going to make sure we do intentional, is service. We're going to make sure that this world knows, that our communities know what Jesus does in our own life by serving. And so service allows us to restore the things that need restored, to beautify the things that aren't beautiful, because that's what Jesus does for us. So we get to be a gospel metaphor for the world by doing these different types of things. So whether it looks like at a neighborhood center and going and passing out food, or going to the food pantry or the clothing pantry and passing out and building relationships with people who are in need, or whether that looks like taking care of tangible needs in your specific local community, whether it looks like cutting down trees or beautifying homes and painting and working and getting sweaty. We do it not to gain, we do it out of our identity in Jesus, so that people may look and ask the question, why are you doing what you're doing? And the one explanation is Jesus, and they get to hear that. The last thing we get to do, and we're going to be very intentional with, is time together, so fellowship. We're going to make sure that we're spending time knowing one another well. So when we're hurting, the others hurt. When we're laughing, the others laugh. When we're crying, when we're filled with pain and brokenness, the others in your community know you and know you well enough to speak the truth of the gospel to. But if we're not being intentional with being transparent, they're not going to know that they need to speak this truth into your life. So the phrase, "it's okay to not be okay," but Jesus doesn't let us stay there. Through his community, through his body, is going to hold true in these times. So we'll discuss different things of life. We'll discuss the sermon, and we'll get down into the roots, into the groundwork of where we're at. And sometimes that's okay, and sometimes that's not okay. But we're going to grow together in praising Jesus for the work that he's currently doing right now, and the work that he will complete one day when he returns. So the difference between small groups and community groups essentially is that community groups are outward facing. Community groups don't exist to fill you up. Community groups exist to be on the mission and purpose of what Jesus died for, and that's to save lost sinners into his community for a purpose, for an eternal purpose, and to have a hope. And so we get to be operating out of our identity, because that's where it starts, to serve, to love, to invite, to pursue, and then to build relationships, to genuinely care for people who we know who don't have the hope of Jesus. Community groups are meant to point you to the gospel by the diversity of ages, cultures, races, languages, and that way when we operate and people outside of our groups look in and say, what and why are you guys doing what you're doing? We have one answer, and that's Jesus. We have one explanation, and that's the gospel, because he saved us from our sin and rebellion into a life of community and purpose. And so we don't drift into affinity, we strive for diversity so we can point to the one who brings all different colors, different races, different languages together. Because these community groups are founded on the gospel, they have a purpose and a mission of the gospel to be proclaimed and to be seen. We want to then operate out of that gospel identity. So the way that the world sees Jesus, the gospel, is through the body of Christ, the church, with one purpose and one mission, and that's to proclaim the message through word, through deed, through service, and through having fun together. And so the foundation has to be the gospel, has to be Jesus' mission and his purpose, and that's to save lost sinners, of whom we are the worst people that we know, worst sinners that we know, so then we can go into the world with a message of hope, because it's our story that we're inviting other people into. Where do we want to go?